Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Clearly, there wasn't any snack time, was there? How excited are you? Miss Africa. Hello? All right, so we are here this afternoon to talk about how storytelling can simplify scientific discoveries and build an ecologically conscious population. So my first question before I introduce the panel, how many of us in the room are ecologically conscious? By show of hand, put your hand up. I can see it's quite a few. Okay, so my panel has got a job to do in educating over 98% of the audience on what it means to be ecologically conscious individuals. So in no particular order, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our panel. First up, I think would be a more interesting introduction to this audience, is John Akinboyewa, the creator of Hungree app. So for those of you in the room, if you haven't downloaded Hungree app, please get onto Google Store or Play Store and download this app. This is one of the first apps that is focusing on food waste and food waste management. And for all of us who are not ecologically conscious, it means we leave a lot of food on our plates. So if we do, we are not conscious about it. And he will be talking to us about what this app can or cannot do and why it is important in this conversation. The next person up I would like to introduce the first ever streaming non-profit video service app for animals and plants. Please join me in welcoming David Casselman, CEO of Ecoflix, to the panel. Welcome, David. And our last but not least speaker is a scientist, and he spends a lot of time figuring out, what latest scientific discoveries are important for livestock. And he is Guyo from International Livestock Research Institute. Welcome, Guyo. So you all have this, right? We just have one. Keep sharing. Okay, so let the conversations begin. The audience right in front of you is 98% unaware of what it takes to be ecologically conscious. So maybe let us start the conversation there. What does it mean to be ecologically conscious in this particular moment in the times in which we live in? Why is it important? Maybe let's start with the scientists. Do you want to go first, Guyo?
Okay, I think very big question, but I'll try to give it that attempt. I think if you're a student of ecology, and for that purpose a student of environment, you will understand a lot of change, both driven by the global changes around climate, around human, what we call human-induced changes and a number of other things. So when you see all these changes with all the indicators around climate variability, the rainfall variability, the pasture variability, and etc., the only thing you can do is to question back and look at where did we came from? What really changed for us to see the unprecedented situations we have currently, like in the Horn of Africa. We had 5 to 6 back-to-back drought in the last 2.5 years. And if you work with the livestock population and communities, they always say, we don't know what the change is about, but this is a big change that we are unable to cope with because we don't have recovery between, these shocks. And that now actually questions, what have we done to our nature? And how do you question yourself in everything that you do to start questioning and say, what have you done? And that is, I think, the start of being conscious of what change imply in your day-to-day. You might be doing something in urban centers, you might be doing something in your own village, but it has a huge implication in the way it builds up into the big change that we're talking about around climate and etc. So for me, I think a conscious population is population that look at all these things. What they eat, how does this change, how does all the pattern of things that you are used to changes, and it's a start of how you build, ecologically conscious a community.
Thank you very much. So I think we'll go back now to you to the same question. What does it
I think it's important to understand that everybody looks at this issue from their own lens, like every issue. So if you're in the United States and you're talking about ecological issues, they're different than, for example, here in Nairobi or in China. Every country has different habits and practices. But to talk about what really is at the heart of ecological consciousness, you have to understand that the world, the entire world, is a circle of life. There are animals, there are plants, and people are part of the animals of the world. And when we came to this planet, it was basically 97%, sorry? Not working? Oh. When we came to this planet, people represented a tiny fraction, maybe 2 or 3% of the living animal population. And because we've developed and taken our liberties with the planet, we have grown livestock, millions and millions of cows and sheep and goats and chickens, and we have populated our countries with billions of people. The world has now flipped over. 97% of the living things in this planet are people and their domestic animals, livestock and people. 3% is wild living things. That is a terrible change in the things, the ingredients that are needed for the world to be stable. Because we're doing things for ourselves and we're not paying attention to the effects that it's having, things like cattle feed in a way, and they belch gas that goes into the atmosphere. A few cattle wouldn't be a problem. But when you clear entire forests to feed those cattle, now you lose the ability of those trees to help clean the oxygen, and you add methane from the cows, and pretty soon you start getting the problem people are calling climate change. The planet's heating up, and things are going to get worse and worse and worse until people wake up and realize that we need to be conscious of our impact on the world, that we are only part of it, and we're going to destroy it for everybody, including ourselves. That's the concept of being ecologically conscious, aware of our impact and trying to become more in tune with how we can help bring back a balance of nature so wild animals, people, trees, oceans, everything's in balance again, and hopefully the world will settle down, because right now we're on a collision course with the dinosaurs. We're not going to exist if we keep on the path we're going.
Thank you very much, Andy. So you pass the mic over to Jay. Did you say? Yeah. He allowed me to call him Jay, so we will call him Jay for John.
Sounds good.
Sounds good? Excellent. So, John, you are also in the same field, and before we come to Hungree App, I wanted you to demystify these complex conversations that the last two panelists were talking about. For a young millennial who doesn't farm, does not therefore notice that we had floods and rains didn't come on time for the last 6 farming seasons in Kenya, how would they be able to be ecologically, what should they be seeing that helps them raise that consciousness from where you are sitting as a person in food waste?
I think the statistics are right around us. My focus and what I was trying to look at with the Hungree app, and not going into detail on that, but just looking at the community around me. I was a college student who would be starving, and I wouldn't be able to focus on my homework. And I know somewhere on campus, there's free pizza going into a trash. And you can't have enough WhatsApp groups. You can't have enough text messages. You can't have enough conventional methods to be able to identify the location, timing, and the available quantity of this kind of food. And we tend to over-engineer things. So I'm an engineer by training, and I know as society we'll over-engineer it, and we don't look at a simple, very, very direct solution to solve a very common problem. And I just wanted a way to get notified of free food. Knowing that it does end up in the trash. But then when you start delving, you delve into the actual statistics, over 1.5 billion tons of food wasted, 800+ million people searching for a meal daily around the world. Let's not even talk about the pollution and the methane. The number one item in the most municipal landfills is food. And so beyond just carbon gases, those food gases as well, methane emissions, looking at the fact that food waste costs humanity $1 trillion a year. That's our governments, our citizens. It was very easy to actually say, in a ping-pong approach, so to speak, how can I make it easy for anybody, small scale, big scale, to be able to identify these things? And we chip away at the problem. Yes, we have, as David said, a lot more billions of people on here, but that is also a drastic improvement in human capital. And too many times we're solving problems from a top-down approach where we need somebody to fund it and organize all these people. But if everybody chips away at the rock, it disappears very quickly. And so creating a platform that he can use and he can use and I can use as an individual organization, that's how I kind of got into solving these problems.
Wow. Thank you. Do you feel in the room that you are now getting a bit conscious about ecology? I think you are. So to then now land this whole conversation, and thank you all gentlemen, could you now tell us a little bit about what inspired you? I know, John, you've already touched a bit of it, and I wish I was at campus when you did this. So I would never have been hungry. Yeah, but we know that 40% of food waste, the numbers are actually 40% of food produced on farm and in restaurants is wasted. And yet we know that over 800 million people go hungry every day. What inspired you as an engineer to get into the art and science of actually creating a solution for these problems?
Yeah, you're right. The statistics vary depending on where you are in the world, whether you're talking groceries or in restaurants, but that is about the average, 35 to 50%, depending on where you look at it. Over 30% of our water use and agricultural lands go directly towards food waste. What inspired me, obviously, understanding that if I'm fortunate enough to get an extra sandwich at a restaurant, and I have to travel for work the next day and that extra sandwich is there, combining that knowledge with the fact that whether it's a neighbor, a friend, a fellow student who could, or someone in the public who could get access to that sandwich, it does multiple things. Whether or not I could afford a meal or they could afford a meal, it stops that sandwich from going into the trash. It also feeds that person. It stops the pollution, the negative byproducts and the effects of throwing that sandwich in the trash. And it stops that cycle. And it starts with me just not letting one more sandwich go in there. But it could be another thing with massive food distribution. The United Nations does a lot of great work, tens of billions of dollars of food grain and moving that around the world. But once you get down to ground level, we approach it with our cookie cut solutions where they make pre-packed boxes of potatoes and canned vegetables. And maybe the nursing mother doesn't need that. Maybe she needs powdered formula. How do we just let her know that, hey, there's powdered formula over there and there's potatoes on that side of town? It's very simple. We spend so much time crafting solutions, and and moving a lot of weight to address these problems. But we have smartphones. We use it for so many other things. We use it for social media, which I was saying an example to a friend earlier. You could be in your blanket for a week straight and be in depression and be on social media for a week straight. There's nothing very social about that. But creating a platform that allows humans to connect, and not to talk of the mental health benefits of offering someone a meal in your community and solving some of that, and him being able to offer livestock information to a village of people who could need that. All of that can be done through a simple solution that allows people to communicate. So that's what kind of drove me trying to look at different aspects of those problems within society and try to address it with one solution.
Please, a round of applause to him. I like the audacity. Thank you for going big, bold, and hairy with this problem. So, David, I think you probably are the equivalent of him with animals and all. You know, tell us about your passion. Why did you get into this space, in a crowded space, if you'd like, and why did you focus on the particular niche you focused on?
I've always liked animals, but I had no idea that they needed help until I was older. And then I started to realize that even the poorest people can talk. Many successful people started out with nothing and they found a way. And that doesn't make it easy for anybody who starts out with nothing, and I don't mean to minimize that. But animals can't speak our language, and they have absolutely no way to help themselves. And if we're not killing them and eating them, we're ignoring them or throwing them into cages and letting them die in pain. And all over the world, we're taking over more and more land, so wildlife has no place to go. And then when wildlife starts to encroach on cities, we kill them because they're in our way. So when I was working as a lawyer, I realized I could maybe help some animals, and I spent 40 plus years trying to do legal work to help animals, but it was a small part of what I was doing. And I'm now a recovering lawyer. I've finished. And I realized that I had time and there was more I could do. And it just so happened that I had been involved 10 years earlier. I have a sanctuary in Cambodia. We rescue elephants and other animals, and I'm partners with an amazing woman in Thailand who's world-renowned for her similar work. And we made a film together about the evils of riding elephants because people abuse them terribly in order to allow the elephant to ride. That film taught me something because on the strength of that film, especially in Thailand, but around the world, she convinced people. It's called Love and Bananas, if you ever get a chance to see it. I think it's on Amazon. But that film taught people that there was a dark secret involving riding elephants that people don't know. The torture that they go through to allow you to get on their back. If you saw it, you wouldn't do it. And that film, in a beautiful way, without upsetting the people who are watching, taught them something they needed to know. It inspired them and educated them. And on the strength of that film, she was able to stop 90% of the trekking camps in Thailand from continuing. They found other ways to do it. They made humane camps, like she does. And that, when I retired, convinced me that the single most powerful vehicle I could employ to help make a difference for animals and the planet was film. So then I had to figure out, well, how do I do that? Because there's many places that are making film, and it turns out that the timing was just right, or depending on your perspective, just wrong. COVID had hit when I retired, and filmmaking operations were shutting down all over the world, particularly wildlife filmmaking. Couldn't travel, couldn't do a lot of things. And so there were no shows coming out about wildlife. In addition, there were wildlife filmmakers who had made films all over the world, and they didn't have the money to get them distributed. It takes money to get them in the theaters. It's not just enough to make a good film. It takes connections and money to get a film distributed, and that wasn't happening. So all these wildlife films were being ignored. And so I thought, well, if we could create a channel where people could watch that would be inspiring, educational, particularly for children, and all the way up through with all different kinds of genre, cartoons, podcasts, music videos, documentaries, short films with all different kinds of content, all about animals and the planet, no commercials, that we could use that to give an outlet for wildlife filmmakers. So once they finished a good film, they would automatically have a chance to show it to the world at no cost. And then we had another idea that if we were doing that, there are all these NGOs around the world doing amazing work trying to help animals, but they're located, in most cases, in a narrow spot. You know, here in Kenya, there are many wildlife NGOs trying to help save rhino, elephants, you name it, lions. And they can't raise money. They're busy doing work. How do they raise money? So we decided what we could do is we would give the NGOs the ability to partner with us. They could go to their supporters and say, if you join Ecoflix, your money will come to us. You'll get a year of this channel for free with no commercials, and it's good for your kids, it's free to schools, and at the same time, you'll get a tax deduction depending on where you pay taxes. So an NGO can raise money just by selling subscriptions to our platform, which will then expose more people, educate more people. And that was sort of the original dream, and we've been working now for 4 years to realize it, and we've been very fortunate. We've been working with leaders of countries, we've been working with heads, we have 70 NGO partners around the world, and we're just starting to take off.
Thank you very much, David. So from an engineer to a person passionate to solve for large problems globally, and thank you very much. So Robert, I think this now falls squarely on you. He's trying to protect animals from being exploited, and you're sitting in a place of work where you lead on research that solves for food security. So you do know the numbers that we are dealing with here from a food security perspective, but what's your background and what inspires you to do what you do?
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'll define my inspiration at 2 levels. The first level, I come from I was in a film before this one. I was in one of those counties. I come from Marsabit, which is one of the dryland counties, a really area which has all this variability, both temporary and spatially. And when I was very young, my first career was herding, but then I was not a very good herder, so my father eliminated me from the herd. And I went to school. Just how I went to school is because I think some animals died in the process of delivery. So I didn't do a good midwife, despite the training. So I was taken to school, and somehow, in my later days in high school, when I went to high school in this side, we used to say we're coming to Kenya. So I came to Kenya for my high school. And I realized actually half of my classmates completely ignorant of the North, or they know something very strange about the North. So at that point, I said, okay, since I have herding knowledge, I have all the ecological knowledge, why don't I pursue a career in environment? So that's how I chose environment, and I said, okay, I could do rangeland and basically dryland ecology and the rest. So that's where my career started from. But then after I graduated, I started moving towards a different career path. So I joined IUC, an International Union for Conservation of Nature, working in the dryland program, working across Eastern South Africa and working a lot with dryland communities. The more I started working with dryland communities, actually, I realized how the entire top-down science is applied. All the bias narrative around how people accumulate animals just for the status quo and all these things, how they are not market-oriented. And that gave me more opportunity to publish a lot before my PhD work and work on dryland communities, talking about the ecological knowledge, how this tacit knowledge is not extracted from people to inform rangeland methodologies. So my first work actually is to do a lot of my work, if you look online, is to do participatory rangeland mapping with people. We call it downloading herders mental map. So a herder is somebody who moves purposefully. You don't move opportunistically, as people say. So pulling that mental map of the herders, understanding the ecological indicators of change, how they divide their rangeland map mentally, It's a very interesting process for me, and it has informed a lot of methodological work within the rangeland and etc. So then it came to the commercialization of what they have, and that's actually how I chose my PhD work on livestock commercialization. And I did my PhD work in Kenya, but largely working from Germany. So bringing the knowledge of the community, the contextual knowledge and positionality, plus also bringing other, extra knowledge from market system and understanding, I chose a path. I say, why don't I go into science to inform decision, inform policies, and make science more contextually relevant? And that's actually how I ended up in ILRI now, where I lead a research work on food security early action within the dryland areas of Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia. And so for me, two things now. Constantly, my work entails, generating more contextual research, small projects through postdoc, through PhD students, and also through our own research work that we do. And secondly, also is to sit in many of these panels to give more contextual narrative about dryland and dryland people. So at the climate summit and all the summits that we go to, is basically trying to, how do I moderate this bias using my positionality and also using my own knowledge and etc. So, and that's how I ended up in ILRI. So it's not very much calculated. The initial part is a bit of sleepwalking, and then I realized actually I can choose a path that could also be very important looking at the future around, climate early warning, climate sciences, and food security, bringing all them together. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. Another round of applause, guys. Thank you. So now we would like to dive a little bit into storytelling. And I know that each of you have fantastic stories that you'd like to share with us. Could you give us your experience in terms of how this journey has evolved, and what were the tipping points that happened to you, and how storytelling actually influenced any of that, whether it did or it didn't? David, can we start with you?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, I think like all of you, I love watching movies and shows that are interesting to me. And as I mentioned before, the movie Love and Bananas really taught me something about the power of film. I always watch film for myself. I never thought about what other people would do with it. It was just how I liked it, what I enjoyed, and I figured my taste was different than everybody else, so it didn't matter. If I liked it, I liked it. But when I started to realize that film is incredibly powerful, that is the impact of that film, I realized that you could make film with the purpose of having an impact. So we heard yesterday about documentary films, documentaries where you have real life stories that you bring to the screen. You don't have a lot of license because that's the real story. You tell that story. And then you have feature films where you come up with a story and you choose what you want to tell, and you have actors and you put that story together, and that's very creative and impactful. The difference between those two genres in, for example, what inspires me is the educational component of a story that hits your heart. If you watch a movie that you like, usually it hits your head, you like it, you enjoyed it, it's fun, or it upsets you, or it makes you love it, and it does touch your heart. But it touches your heart in a way where you're not moved to action necessarily, you're just made aware of the fact that that's an important topic to you. The stories that we're trying to make are to bring to people's attention things they don't already know that we think they'd really like to know, that are so interesting, and there's so many of them. I mean, I'll stay away from animals for a minute because I'm all about animals, but one story that just really captured my attention, I couldn't believe it, that I didn't know this already. I'm an old guy, I should know some things. I didn't know this. There's a thing called the mycorrhizal network. And if you can pronounce it, you're better off than I am. It took me a long time. But what it is has to do with the roots of trees primarily. When trees put their roots in the ground, they reach an end point. And then these little fungi connect to the end of the roots, and they literally communicate under the ground with the other trees. They communicate with the babies. When the trees' seedlings fall, they literally can connect to them. They understand them. They send them nutrients. And they can communicate when they're being attacked. Certain plants are being attacked by a deadly predator like tobacco. It will have locusts come in and eat the tobacco, and the tobacco knows. And through the mycorrhizal network, they send out an alarm to the entire tobacco field, and they release a pheromone, which is a chemical that smells and it attracts certain things. So they know enough to send out the right pheromone, and they attract the mortal enemy of the locust. And so that brings the enemy in, and they kill the locust. The idea that plants are communicating, that when you're cutting down a forest here, the trees over there know you're coming, the idea that they actually have feelings for their young and that they're part of a life cycle that we are just oblivious to, that really excited me. So we're trying to find those kind of stories and bring them to life in a beautiful way. Same thing with animals. There's so many animal stories that are amazing, but bring them to light in a way that inspires. We won't show gruesome images. There are lots of organizations that believe, and they're not wrong, it's just a choice, that if you are putting gruesome film, animals being slaughtered or whatever, it upsets people and that'll motivate them to action. I'm not going to argue their methods, I just don't like them. I won't use them. It gives me nightmares. It doesn't really motivate me to action. It makes me angry. So we try to inspire people, not beat them over the head, and we try to give them information they'd like in a way that's sort of secret. You're not feeling like we're pumping knowledge into your head. You're feeling like we're giving you cool things that you want to know. So that's our approach, and that's how we find, I think, an audience that will come away with a new point of view and say, wow, that's really cool, and I actually could do something about that. I could help with that, and I'd like to help with that. So that's kind of how we approach it.
Wow, thank you very much, David, for that. So we're going to pause here for a bit so that we can get some questions from the audience, because we wouldn't want to have a monologue, right? So are there any comments or questions in the room? Because we're going to have two sets of questions, in the midpoint and at the end. Any burning comment, reflection, or question that you would like, please feel free to put up your hand, and the microphone will come to you. It's right out there. Everybody's educated? No, there's no stupid question. The only stupid question is the one that is not asked. So will you allow me to randomly choose any one of you to ask a question? I see a very smart young man over there in black. Yes, with a pen and noting. What reflections do you have hearing what has been shared so far? Introduce yourself, and then if you want to ask a particular panelist, also call them out. Thank you.
Sorry, okay. Okay, I'm Anthony Okuku. I'm from Africa Nazarene. I'm saying I'm Anthony Okuku from Africa Nazarene. I had a question to our gentleman over there.
Jay?
I think I forget the name, but
Jay?
John, yeah.
Jones.
Jay?
Yeah. I heard you talking of the app, the Hungree app. So the question is this app available in the Play Store, or is it available in the Chrome? Because there are some apps, if you go to the Play Store, like the one they were seeing, like the Hungree app, you might not find it on the Play Store, but it will be on the Chrome. Also, on the same note, the way you are saying that this app enables some people who are not having food to get access to food. So how does it work whereby, because it means that you'll have to find a means to send that person, like, do they use Uber, or you also pay for that Uber for that food to come to you, or what means do they use? Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. We'll take another question from a lady in the room. You have a question? Yeah, go ahead. A dash of yellow, yeah.
My name is Rael from Africa Nazarene. My question goes to David. You've said...
Thank you. Sorry about that.
You said you decided to venture into the wildlife field so that you can at least find a way in how we can care for our wildlife. Now, my question is, in your journey, have you encountered a conflict between human and wildlife? And how did you deal with it, or how was your approach in the issue?
Very much. Do we have any one more burning question? We can take one more. If not, we can have the two questions answered. I think, Jay, you could start.
It is available in the Play Store and the Apple Store, first question. Second, this app, there are lots of solutions out there currently tackling food waste, distribution, discount items from grocery stores, things of that sort. What this does is, from a very simple stage, there are multiple stages in our vision, in our roadmap. At this stage, there are two personalities on the app, the provider and the Hungree. The Hungree picks up the food. We do have algorithms in place and in development where we are trying to tap into or tie into rideshare networks. So when they're in between rides on their routes, if there is a transaction on our platform, it can tap in and pick up with that. We do not want a delay in the adoption of you losing out on the fact that a buffet restaurant right now is going to throw away 13 servings at the end of the night. And we're like, let's wait for 2 years of more waste until we figure out how to bring it to you, your luxury. Too many coordination and efforts from several solutions where they're organizing pickup of this and then they're redistributing it over there. That takes too long. The person is within 500 feet of you. You see it on the app. You don't know where it is. You just know it's within 500 feet. They list it. You say, I want it. They accept. You're paired. Done. Simple, scalable, solved. And you can now apply different levels of security and privacy to it. So, for example, we will, if you have food safety, food security, knowledge, then you can click Become a Certified Provider. We verify that information. Now you're a certified provider. So if you're like, you know what, I'm very sensitive, my stomach's a little sensitive. My mother said I can eat a rock, it doesn't matter. So I wouldn't need that, but for some who do, click Certified Providers. It filters. Click your village. So we created this concept called a village. And this is where it ties into storytelling for me. There's so many things I can bring up, and I don't want to take much time here. But the village is not necessarily like your geographical area. Your village is here and here. It could be a housing community. It could be a university campus. Yesterday, we met with administration at Strathmore University right here, and their food court is going to throw things away. Well, they can list it to the Strathmore University village. Now only the students of Strathmore can get it. Create a community. Go on there, share with your friends. I love cooking. I love food. And I might have a barbecue, and maybe I want to share with my friends. So I have a village on the app called J. Atkins Town. My friends join that village. You go on there. I list things to that village specifically because I want to share with my friends. So we made it very versatile. We thought of different solutions there, and it's developing. With more adoption, we can incorporate some of those things. We do have one feature on there that I will preview, and it's hopefully going to be ready before next summer, the hunger-free world. So the app works kind of like a Uber Eats or whatnot, where you're the provider, the Hungree, it matches you, and you can watch on your map. Well, we're going to have a different mode called donor mode. So instead of giving $10 to some organization that has to pull $10 from several people in the world to solve a problem in a crisis situation or just everyday situations, you can go on the app, spend $10, the lady selling bananas halfway across the world gets the money, the listing goes up, people in the area get to claim it, and you watch it all go down, unfold live. 100% donation transferred. So So those are kind of things in development. But we're going to put our roadmap in a little more detail on the website and whatnot, and I'd love to connect with you and tell you more. Thank you.
Okay, you want to do a follow-up question? Okay. Yeah, there was, but I think it's a follow-up to John. Is that follow-up, right?
It's to John. Your app sounds amazing, and
Thank you.
like especially for if elimination of food waste is like the main goal, it's like absolutely brilliant. But you also mentioned like feeding the hungry, and I was just wondering, like unfortunately in the world, I can imagine that there are people who aren't hungry but are stingy, who crowd out the hungry by joining your app and just saying, I want to get as much free food as I can so I don't have to go to the supermarket and spend. Is there any solution to that, or is it just something you've got to live with?
So during this first stage of adoption, I don't want to call it the Wild Wild West, so to speak, but we have thought of that. Absolutely. Depending on the stage of adoption, the stage of, rate of usage, during this adoption stage, we have quotas that we can implement. The fee to join the platform, especially at this stage, we're keeping it at $1 a month or $10 a year. It's throwaway money. You have pictures, you have data servers and whatnot. We're doing it that way. We've talked to city officials, actually, and I mentioned that village. Well, you have a network of providers that provide to that village, and they actually get funding from the city for that. So you just fed the people who actually need it because you list to that village, and they're the only ones that can claim it because we're implementing Hungree Verified. So these are switches that we get to turn on as things move along. So we are addressing that. In fact, the Harvard School of Public Health used this last week to distribute items. So we're rolling it out slowly. There is a invitation code that I will display, and we can share at the end of this session. But it allows you to create a village, right? At least right now, let's get the functionality, let's solidify the mechanics. It allows you to create a village, share with your housing community. You may decide to list it to a public and exclude this village. So we have those things in place, and we're working on more algorithms to make sure those who need it actually get it. Another university is actually creating a village because they have financial private information for the students who actually need it the most, and they're creating that village, and they're going to be supplying to that village, so only the people who need it. So we have addressed some of those concerns, because that was Europe, right? I may have been one of those that's like, get this meal, get this meal, get this meal. But you want it to go to the right people, get distributed properly. But yeah, those mechanics are in place.
Thanks a lot, John. I think let's move to David for the second question. The tension between...
Human-wildlife conflict is a very good question, and it's a worldwide issue. And I won't cover the world, but I'll cover a couple examples. Elephants, starting with the biggest example, in many countries, Thailand, Cambodia, Africa, are seriously endangering people in certain locations. It's usually where civilizations are built along their migratory paths. And the minute you're doing that, they're instinctively taught to go where you are, and you shouldn't probably be there is the truth of it, but you are. And you're people, so you can get away with it. Then the elephants come in, and then everybody says, what are you doing here? You're in our way, it's dangerous, somebody gets killed, and then it's slaughter all the elephants. So we've come up with a variety of solutions, not me personally, although I've been involved in several. Lots of different solutions have been developed. A good thing about elephant solutions is there are a variety of ways. The simplest way is elephants are deathly afraid of bees, if you can believe it. They don't want to suck them up their trunk. And so if you put yellow flowers in an area where you don't want them to go, and the bees want to go to the flowers, the elephants hear that buzzing, even from a distance, they don't want to go there. So that's one way they avoid people, because you've created this semi-barricade. Another way is to recreate their migratory path. So if the elephants are traveling where you have a freeway, there are several places here where tunnel was created under the freeway, and the elephants literally follow their path, and they get to this tunnel, and they say, well, okay, and they go in there, and they get used to it, and they don't bother people because they don't have to go on the freeway anymore. In civilized communities where elephants aren't running around, and when I say civilized, I mean urban jungles. There's no wild animals. It's not that you're not civilized in a place where you have wild animals, but I'm talking about cities where there's no room for animals. And that's a terrible thing. And what happens is the animals that are wild, that are trying to survive in this urban jungle, are slaughtered in a bunch of different ways. And they also have biological problems because they can't find their mates. They're cut off by freeways. They can't find others of their kind to breed with. And so the species gets more and more and more isolated, and they don't have biodiversity. So to solve that problem, communities have created wildlife crossings there, over freeways, where they literally create trees and flowers and plants, and the animals literally travel to the freeway, and instead of going out on the freeway and get killed, they can go over. They're starting to develop more of those. There are also other approaches, especially with elephants, where they collar them, and they have a Wi-Fi network where the matriarch, the leader of the herd, is on Wi-Fi, and the community is known. They know that there's a warning system, and so if that herd is coming into the area, they'll know because there'll be a Wi-Fi signal, there's a warning, and people know to avoid that area for the time while they're passing through. So these are some of the solutions, and these things affect coyotes, they affect wolves, they affect cougars, and of course, obviously, I've talked about elephants. So there's a lot of examples, and many more. In England, they have different problems. But yes, there are working on solutions, but we're way behind. There's much more that needs to be done.
No, thank you, David, for that. I hope that answered your question. If you need any more, you can do some follow-ups after. So let us have another round of questions before we open up the floor once again. And I wanted to go back to Roba. Let's go down memory lane of scientific discoveries. We know that over the centuries and years, the biggest innovations and discoveries have actually helped solve for some of these big problems that we all know. And we're sitting in a room with young people who are, potentially the next big, inventors of solving for the problems that we have as humanity. From your work and some of this, the evidence that you're seeing, is it possible for Africa, for example, to solve for food security in our lifetime? And what gives you that confidence from a scientific perspective?
Okay, thank you very much. I should have to say good luck. Yeah, I think, yes, it's a very good question. It's a question we grapple with every time. And there are two parts to it, actually. As you said, if you go back to the down memory lane, I think when I started the first question that you asked around ecologically conscious society, we all have history where we're coming from. I come from a pastoral community with 2,000 head of sheep and goat, which we call current account, and then we have some cows, which is saving account, and then we have fixed deposit account, which is camel. And that shows real portfolio of household that can sustain itself without necessarily looking at government or looking at themselves. That is not very far, it's 20 years ago. But today, if I go to my village, I have 95% of the people cannot do that capably. And that is really worrying. And there's a big change. But then the second part is that we are also not doing the right we're not using the right evidence to shape the right interventions, either at policy level or at practice level. We talk about our animals, because I work in livestock, there are different things you can do. Basically, an animal, a cow, whatever you have, is a factor of the feed, it's a factor of genetics, it's a factor of market. For it to help you solve, basically get an income and solve food problem. So I think my answer to your question is, yes, I think there's still prospect. And that different reasons why there's prospect. One, I think, the evolution in technology, the app for bridging information gap and information flow and etc. at certain level of society is still evolving very strongly. The second is also that there are also good government approaches that embraces evidence, basically to align their solution, whether at policy level, at practice level. They're doing that. Third is that we're also doing a lot of research work within ILRI and others, crop-based sciences, where they are really improving on genetics and genomics of particular species that could survive with this change. But the biggest problem is transferring that nice science to the ground, apply it to the community. All these things is still very noisy. And if we fix this noise within that, then we still look at prospectively, we look at a very good future where we could actually handle this intractable problem that we're looking at. What gives me hope is exactly the evolution in science, technology, and the behavioral change in certain part of the government is a very important input to that. But the disconnect between the communities that are affected by food shocks and those who are giving solution to food shocks is what depresses me, actually. It doesn't give a lot of hope in terms of, just to drive this point, we had a dialogue with elders in a place called Isiolo in northern Kenya, and just reflecting on what the drought meant to them. They gave their own account, and I asked them, but there was early warning. Why didn't you sell your animal in time? They said, early warning from who? I say, from government, from all those who are providing early warning. They said the only early warning we believe is the one from above and the one based on animal behavior, arrangement of star, all other knowledge that is very much embedded within the community. Immediately I saw the disconnect between this science of the community and the science that organizes the early warning. And that is actually how we designed two research projects now to see is there potential for bringing that science to the fore and what is that opportunity showing. The last, I think, is that the early warning, this what we call last mile connectivity to the people is a big problem. And I think this is the question for the app also. How much app information that actually could bridge all the information, could reach people who are isolated, who have no smartphone, who are not connected to internet. These are all big issues we are dealing with. So if we invest in the right infrastructure, in behavioral change, and translating evidence to solution very systematically, then there is good prospect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert, for giving us a ray of hope. So it is possible, but we need to work to build the ecosystem. So I'm coming back to you, David, on following up from Rob around the behavioral science now, right? Because he's mentioned the science is known. We're not short of information. We know the statistics. We know what's possible, how to coexist and not. But at the end of the day, where the rubber meets the road is the behavior of humanity. In your experience working with animals and humans and creating these stories on your platform, what have you learned over the years? What is your reflection on whether it is possible to influence human behavior to live responsibly on the planet?
I would say my experience has been that most people are oblivious to the fact that people are the most damaging thing living. We are causing the planet and all the animals and ourselves all the harm that we're facing and much more to come. And I think it's not out of malice. I don't think it's because people are even aware. I think that most people don't know that some of the things that people are doing are really harmful. Most of that does not apply to Africa, unfortunately. Most of it does not apply to other countries which are more agrarian and are not in big cities. The people on the planet who are doing the most harm are the people where I live. I would say the United States has got to be somewhere at the top of the list, and other countries like ours where money has become the biggest and most important thing, and who you hurt people or the planet to get it really doesn't matter to them. They don't think about their impact until it comes home to them. And then when it hits them, their child develops a disease because the air is no good, or their water is poisoned, or there's too much plastic and they end up having a cancer. in the water. There are all kinds of things that we are all going to experience, and we're going to say, oh, why didn't we do better? And so I think the answer to the question is education. And I don't mean education like force-feeding people or, you have to study our planet and you have to know. I mean education in a way that people enjoy it. They like learning. They want that information because not only is it helpful for them, it's interesting and it's important. And if people affect just one or two other people, there's a expression I heard. One person says, "What difference can I make?" But you realize there are probably 5 billion people in the world saying that at the same exact moment. Well, 5 billion people who want to make a difference, it would happen overnight. So harnessing the power of a common goal that people realize, and it's unfortunate because some people are more victimized by the thing that other people do, and the people who can make the biggest difference care the least. That has to change. And part of the reason why Ecoflix is focused on education for children is because the children, especially the children in countries like America that don't pay enough attention to the impact we're having, need to learn these things so they can do better. If you know better, you can do better. And that's really the bottom line.
Thank you very much. Know better, do better. Thank you, David. And I will actually use the same question to you, Jay, and say, because you are already in a space where adoption is key. And as a marketing fellow, I know very well that if you got the first 2.5% and the next adopter level, 10% of the market adopting the app, you will be transformational, right? So what are you learning, and how can you share some of the insights around human behavior leading the change that David is calling out on from your perspective with your business?
Our business, we're all solving it.
Yes, thanks for the correction.
In my journey in trying to come up with the easiest way for me to find pizza that was going to the trash, I realized food banks, one of the largest ones in Colorado and Denver area where I base out of, were open 3 hours a day for 3 days a week, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The single parent who needs food is probably working a double shift. The solutions, like these issues, touch our lives individually in so many different ways, but it's present, it's in our face. But we look up to bigger initiatives, local governments, all of these things to facilitate solutions and solving it. And I realized, looking at the stories, how individuals are affected, a student, a poor family, a single parent, an NGO who wants to donate a warehouse full of food. I ran into somebody the other day who says, we've had 2 warehouses after COVID in Texas, and we don't know how to distribute what's there. And no one knows where it is. How do you notify the people? That inspired me to say, make this as simple as possible, peer-to-peer, to create that awareness. And then we also want to be able to tell various usage stories for this product. You have a university community. You have people in the city that the local government wants to help with feeding. You have United Nations or food bank efforts. Potatoes and rice goes to die at the back of food banks all day, every day. But how do you get it out? And so we're capturing all these examples and use cases, and I can sit here and talk for an hour on several of them, but we're incorporating all of that into a common solution that he can use and he can use. And we're centering it around a key common need in our society, humanity, which is food.
No, thank you very much, Jay, for that. I tell people that one of the decisions we all make every day, consciously or unconsciously, is what we eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But in the journey to try and create awareness around this whole ecological movement is to then say how much of your behavior is actually negatively impacting the environment in which you operate. And that's what I do for my day job. But I really hear the examples that have been shared here. And I think, Rob, your story about how incomes and livelihoods were possible 20 years ago back in northern Kenya, and now it's not possible, is a result of the behaviors that we as humans have started, experiencing. So I want to pause here for a bit and open up the floor again for 2 more questions. Then I'll come back to you all for reflections. And if you have any questions to the audience. So if you have, okay, I can see good hands coming up. Very good, 1, 2, excellent. Because I was gonna ask you, so we have our 3 questions. So who's helping us with a microphone in the room? I think our first question is over here. Excellent, thank you. So please again, introduce yourself, the question, and who you're addressing the question to. Thank you.
My name is Ceci Masi. I'm a filmmaker, producer, and director. My question goes to you, John.
Yes.
Yes. The Hungree app is a very good idea, kudos for that. But my question is, have you considered Africa as a market, as a potential market, seeing as here we have so many people who are dying out of hunger, and we have a lot of waste food already. And as much as there's connectivity with a smartphone and internet, the people who are dying out of hunger don't have that access. So is it something that you've figured out? Is it a structure that you have in place so that you can counter this problem, especially in Africa? I've downloaded the app myself, so I've already integrated myself with the app. And I don't know if it's not working in Nairobi. So my second question would be, if it's not working in Nairobi for somebody who has access to an iPhone that has connectivity, who can be able to get these notifications, then how can we be able to create a structure that these people who now need the food can access the food? So the 2 questions.
Thank you. We'll take the 3rd question, and then we'll answer all 3 at a go. Yeah. The gentleman with a hat. Yeah.
My name is Odoch. In a way, you asked my question. But can I just marvel at the food situation? And I could also maybe ask my other colleagues other questions. It seems like the food design you are proposing only works in an economy with fat on it. So you can shave off the fat and redistribute. That's what seems to be the case. If it were in a situation where there is no fat on it, maybe it would be very, very difficult. 2, it seems to work in a situation where food is a commodity. And in a situation where food is not a commodity, maybe it would be very, very difficult. And I hope I can ask my friend from, did you say Masabit, Samburu? A question at another time. Thank you. Do I keep this?
Thank you, Mr. Odoch. I think we will take these questions in the interest of time, and then we wrap up the session. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the person who asked the first question around GMO and its implication. I think this is a very interesting question, but let me use Ali Mazrui's analogy. He likes saying, we produce what we don't consume and consume what we don't produce, largely in the past. For me, I think to answer your question, I think we have lost an opportunity as a country for that self-reflective, data-based, very objective conversation There is a lot of noise, especially when you don't have data. Food security data is a political thing. Anybody will play the politics and the direction that they want to play with. So to answer that question, we need a thorough research analysis, I think, for those who are in the crop sciences. But definitely, I think your concern is valid, given that we haven't, where I sit, we haven't pushed the margin of what we can do internally for us to say, now the only solution has to come from somewhere. It has to be innovative, it has to be new. We haven't pushed that limit. So there's a lot of potential for pushing the limit within the country in what we do to shape our production, to choose our own crops that can do better, to choose better animal genetics, to open up market for the farmers. There's a lot of potential already in there before we get into this messy conversation around GMO and etc.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, Jay, you had the other two questions.
Yes. You know, you said something about 5 billion people saying they want to make a change, right? And 5 billion individual people saying they want to make a change. And they do this change individually, but you get power in numbers. I do believe in the logic that indecision is a decision in and of itself. And so it starts with each person. And so what we try to do with the app, first of all, is make it very simple to solve the problem closest to you, right? And I'll address your question in these communities you're saying where there's no fats, there's no excess. Well, let's start with where there is fat. And let's start with what percentage of the population of the world population lives in the areas where there is still some fat. I'm Nigerian. Lagos, Nigeria is a market that we're trying to deploy this for it to work. And we have this National Geographic-esque concept of food security being, in these deserts, or it's a very, very poor person. Well, the lady blending pepper down the street has a smartphone. She doesn't have clean water as easy, but she's got a smartphone. In disaster relief situations, Starlink satellites will deploy a network over there, right? A de facto network very quickly. There are solutions everywhere. We just need to adopt it. And so I am trying, and our vision is to make it very easy for you to adopt, okay? 6 steps, 30 seconds to a minute, list what's closest to you. Now, I'm an electrical engineer. I've worked with equipment a lot. What we are developing already is easy-to-use terminals with easy-to-use graphical interfaces for those without smartphones, so they tap into the Hungree app network.
Thank you. So I will request you to wrap up the conversation on your end. I know we cannot exhaust all the conversations in this 1 hour. Can you give us your quick reflections? Let me start with you, Jay, because you've got the microphone. You know, we were here talking about stories, yeah?
Yep.
How storytelling can simplify discoveries and build an ecologically conscious community, population, whatever it is. Having had the conversations in the room, what's your takeout? What do you walk away with, inspired that what you're actually doing is playing up to that narrative?
I mentioned that we've identified a plethora of use cases. One thing that's inspiring is when discussing any use case for any one situation, no one has ever been able to say, yeah, I don't think I can have use for that. And that's how we knew we were onto something. And hearing people's stories, understanding how the way they live their lives, if they pay attention to how they live their lives, they realize, I can use this solution to affect my community closest to me, and on a grand scale, in turn affect the world. So that was very inspiring for me.
Thank you very much. David?
So the mantra that I like to live by is dream big, start small, but act now. And what we're doing is an example of that, and it takes time, but I reflect back, for example, on the start of Netflix, who's probably not worried about us. But when Netflix started, they were a mom and pop. They were mailing DVDs to houses and then CDs to houses. And now they're doing pretty well. So I hope, and we are networking with people and corporations and governments, and I hope that we will catch fire at a point, and there'll be many, 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 many billions of people who will take advantage of the opportunity to see, learn, be inspired, no commercials. And I have asked Ty, I gave him a QR code. I was hoping they could put it on the screen so all of you could get a free subscription for a year to Ecoflix. If they can't do that, I can stand here and I'll give them to you one at a time off of my phone. And you'll get a chance to see what it is. You can watch it on your phones, your computers, and if you get Apple TV, you can watch it on your TV. And hopefully here and elsewhere, people will say, I'm learning something, this is exciting, and then they'll tell their friends, and they'll tell their friends, and we'll be as big as AT&T.
Well, thank you very much, David. We will take the QR code. Please, whoever has it should put it up on the screen. 1 year free subscription is phenomenal. Thank you. And lastly, Guyo, what's your reflection?
Okay, my reflection is, I think as a scientist in the food security space, one of the things that I've found out quite strongly, linking back to the story, is in all the prediction, the early warning, the preparedness, and many things, the perspective of the user or the beneficiary is largely missing from the food security response architecture. And I think it's historical because a lot of things are done so top-down. Even the apps people do, they do it and then they see, let's see how it functions. There's no co-production model of a product that people are going to use. And it's one of my biggest headaches. Maybe my colleague in the panel could solve part of my problem, and that's why I'm happy to be here today, is how do we plug into the perspective of the user, because all the narration, all the opportunities that is in that is really lost, and we keep on struggling. Up to now, I think 50 years down the line, the response architecture is almost wired in the same direction. So we are trying to embrace that, and we're trying to bring in innovation, clever ideas that will actually help us to now work from below. Resilience from below. We talk about resilience, but always from top. So we are questioning all these things, and I think there's a huge opportunity through innovation, technologies that are coming up to work on this issue in a concerted way, and I look at that feature as one of the most possible feature that could help us to come over this issue.
Wow, thank you very much, Robert, for that as well. So ladies and gentlemen, I think this brings us to the tail end of our conversation. And to wrap it up, I think I would like to summarize in very simple seconds to say what I heard is that we only have one planet. It doesn't matter whether it's the North or the Sub-Saharan Africa, but the impact of every human being's behavior on the planet affects all of us in equal measure. So unfortunately, if you're not living in resilient ecosystems, then the impact is worse with communities that are disadvantaged. So I think today's session was just but one of those conversations you're going to have to build your awareness around the environments in which we live. And looking around in the room, I'm inspired that we have lots of young people, storytellers, producers, and I know each one of you is on social media, right? So each one of you has an Instagram account or a Snapchat account. Can you make a commitment to what you're going to do to help your community become ecologically conscious about their behaviors? If you made that one act, I think that would speak to David's mantra of, we dream big, we start small, but we act now. So we each have a responsibility because collectively, we actually have a global economy that can enable us to thrive in a resilient and sustainable manner. So thank you very much, Taya, for inviting us. I hope you found this a bit, useful for all of you. From myself to the panel, it's Asante Sana. Thank you very much for taking the time. And over to you. Well, yes, thank you.